Back in the Xbox 360 days, Bioshock and Oblivion were the poster children of the 7th generation of consoles. These games were the future of gaming, and with good reason. Both games were legends in the early years of the generation, but it leaves you to wonder if they hold up all these years later, or if they're just best remembered as opposed to played. Bioshock was fairly revolutionary for its time. It heavily relies on visual storytelling to immerse you in the subaquatic world of Rapture. The visual storytelling of Bioshock piques your curiosity about Rapture, which then leads you further and further down the M. Night Shyamalan-like twist. Exposition for how Rapture became what it is basically spelled out through a number of audio logs, though these aren't necessary for you to understand the main story. However, the story is written as if it's meant to be viewed as opposed to played. While it is good in my opinion, it feels more like a movie plot that's trying to distract you with the intrigue of the world. If you were to retell Bioshock's main story from memory, I honestly doubt it would take more than a few sentences. I'm not saying that I don't like the story, I just don't think it quite holds up. Unfortunately, the game hasn't aged particularly well either. The original Bioshock was a fairly notorious bad port, but I played the remastered version for this review, and it didn't fare all that much better. While I'm not 100% sure if it's the game or my hardware, I did run into some issues, albeit a little minor. However, the gunplay hasn't aged quite as well as you would hope. It was clearly designed controller first. While this is expected from many games of the 7th generation, it's kinda sad to see how much better this game plays on a controller as opposed to a mouse and keyboard. I was honestly shocked at how the gunplay felt on mouse and keyboard, and while I did get used to it, playing the game on a controller just feels right, despite the hefty rust I've collected over these past couple of years. While it doesn't quite salvage the worst aspects of the aging gunplay, it's a much smoother interface, and definitely makes it more enjoyable, and reminded me why I enjoyed it all those years ago. But at least it does hold up decently in aesthetics. While I'm not the biggest fan of Art Deco, in fact I often find it ugly, it's hard to understate how refreshing the style and colors would be, especially with the brown color palette the 7th generation would adopt in the following years. The graphics haven't aged the best, but the style definitely fits the tone and the theme of a futuristic city, at least from a 1940s perspective. The world, lighting, and character design all fit the horror theme extraordinarily well, as does the soundtrack. While the game is often silent, the original soundtrack and the addition of the period pieces adds to the tension, or on occasion makes the world feel empty. But empty in a way like whatever happened to Rapture is really fresh. Or perhaps it's just a trap. But unfortunately, one of the sections that Bioshock doesn't do well is accessibility. While there are subtitles, there is no in-game language options. There are 4 difficulty settings, easy, medium, hard, and survivor, but medium was quite challenging at points, especially if you can't figure out how to get the most out of your plasmids or search every nook and cranny for ammo. While fighting does become easier with experience, I think that this game might be difficult for those with more limited mobility or reaction time. Bioshock has questionable convenience. While it's available on Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch through Bioshock the Collection, and available digitally on GOG, Steam, and Epic Game Store, its performance on PC is notoriously shaky. While I personally didn't have any crashes and found the sensitivity in a remastered version acceptable, I did experience some screen tearing on a GPU and monitor setup that should be well more than capable of handling this game. I also experienced some odd audio repetition, almost like a CD was scratched or something, as well as clipping through the world upon some deaths, but the latter could be caused by my FOV. I also saw some minor graphical issues, likely caused by my graphics card, but they were fairly easy to ignore, and I can't really mark it not knowing for sure exactly what the cause is. While it hadn't quite aged as gracefully as I thought prior to picking it up again, I do think that Bioshock still has a decent amount to offer, especially if you haven't played it yet. However, there are a lot of problems that this game has that made me rethink my recommending it to other people. Realistically, it's a lot more niche than I remember. And while I did have fun with the game, it took me a while to get into it this time round. And it also brought back some memories I had forgotten about how difficult I had found it as a much less experienced gamer. After all, it was my first major FPS that I played from start to finish, so my bar was a lot lower back then. And while it doesn't keep up with modern stuff, I personally would rate it a decent on the A scale, though with its specific issues, I can easily see while some might rate it lower if they were to play it for the first time now. But let me know what you think in the comments below, check out my Dark Void review, and consider subscribing. Until then, this has been Rob the Slob, and I'll see you in the virtual commute.